And I checked his terms and it says, I own all of these samples legally and I want 50% if you get a placement. They were all just songs he ripped off of YouTube. Not like obscure soul samples from the 60s, not like French film music. I'm talking about Kylie Minogue. Peace, what's going down? It is the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast. My name is DJ Payne One. I'm joined by my illustrious hosts, Aaron Knight and Dame Ritter. And everyone's got an Atlanta hat on. I'm always the odd man out.
Yeah. Anyway, I heard Rolling Loud was kind of a mess. I heard a lot of people complaining about Rolling Loud. I saw 21 Savage say that he'll never perform at Rolling Loud again. It had something to do with his car service or something like that. We're not getting a car service. I don't know the details, but a lot of people like cut their set short or like showed up late. So that was like, I didn't get all the specific details, but it seemed like, you know, Rolling Loud was dealing with a lot of people showing up late. And, you know, there's only a certain amount of time. You got hella artists on the bill. So, you know, if people start showing up late, I'm sure that just creates a huge mess. You know, and some artists not being able to perform. Did you guys see any of that blowback from Rolling Loud?
I mean, I've been seeing blowback from Rolling Loud since they started their series again this year, like hitting different cities. I've been seeing a ton of fans saying it was a terrible experience for them. Not enough water stations. VIP is too expensive for what you're paying for it. People are getting trampled, et cetera, et cetera. And then maybe after Miami, the first ones I've been seeing, it's empty. Nobody's here. I hate this. The price was too high. Sets started super late. There's not enough food available. This is the first time I'm hearing from artists, but I heard like 3 drill rappers got kicked off of their set. I heard 21 Savage was frustrated. I heard Nicki Minaj came late, but then she was like, no, I had other issues that were on them. So who knows? She has a reputation for being late, but Rolling Loud also has this storied reputation for, at least this time. Let me not shout out to Sharif. I know he's trying to do his thing, but I think a lot of people are dealing with trying to scale post-pandemic. And I think that people should be going back into what made them do well. So yeah, I heard a ton of stuff, but it seems unfortunate, but I think festivals are dying.
I was going to say, Aaron, because you run a festival, you organize a festival. So is it a matter of, you see this happen a lot, this trend happen a lot in different levels of the music business. So for example, you'll see, I know with in my city where you really can't have long running hip hop events because of structural racism, a number of things. What will happen is a club will, or a bar, usually a bar, not a club, will start booking hip hop acts with the express purpose of making a ton of money, because you'll make a ton of money, you know, especially if you're working with socialites from the city who aren't promoters, who just want to make a ton of money. So then there's no real protocol, like security protocol, organizational protocol, and nothing like that. And so they make a ton of money. There are a bunch of problems. The police come in and shut them down. And the second a bar starts doing that, everyone just kind of knows, okay, they're on their way out. This is their last ditch effort to squeeze as much money as they can out of local patrons of color before the shit hits the fan. And then everyone loses as a result, at least out here. And then you see that happening, you know, with labels. I mean, labels tended to bounce back because they have such a high concentration of wealth, but also not all major labels do, because there was that whole consolidation period over, you know, the last few decades where we used to have many major labels. Now we have 3 or 4. So, you know, they can't adapt to changes. And the biggest change when it comes to festivals and live music was the pandemic. And so are they just trying to bounce back in a way that, so what you're saying is they're trying to bounce back in a big way, but cut costs at the same time, and they can't do that. They have to take a couple steps back to move forward.
Yeah, I think for us, we we have a festival, but it's an experience. We market it as a festival so people understand it, but our experience is built to super serve our audience. Do you know what I'm saying? So everything from location, like we do it inside of a brewery that has air conditioning, but they have the giant tray doors, so you still get the outside experience. So that way people can get the indoor outdoor. We have vendors, we do a basketball game, we do a block party. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, or an after party. So we go through and think about the fan experience. We're not here for the artist, to be honest. And we catch flack from the artists sometimes. Like the artists are like, well, we should change this because of this. And we're like, no, y'all perform every day or every week, whatever. The fans get this experience once, and we can always count on a good fan base if we serve them well. And I think artists, even still, the artists that we book for the festival don't understand that. They're still like, well, these are the things we want, because artists are used to being catered to. So I think Sharif is in a place where and team, I'm not putting it on him, but they're in a place where they're trying to serve major, bigger artists. Cause Rolling Loud started out as an underground kind of indie hip hop thing. It was all the hot kids, but having 21 Savage, Nicki Minaj, Pop Smoke, even those people before he passed are like, that's a major feat to get that many personalities, that many A-list hip hop celebrities in the room. And I think that if you're serving the wrong audience, like I just don't believe in, to be honest, super serving artists. I think the artists are going to get served. And so I think that's the issue that you're seeing with these festivals. They're trying to provide the best artist experience, and not to say that you shouldn't. I think you should take care of your artists. That's not at all what I'm saying. But it's post-pandemic. You're charging people more. They have to do more. And, they're taking back. It's not that they're trying to underserve fans, but because of COVID, there's certain things. Merchandise is more expensive. All these different things happen. And I think that people should be going smaller, make it smaller, do less things, charge a premium price, but give people that experience. But everybody's like, let's go do it 10, 15 times because we can make more money. And I'm like, how about you do it less times and see if more people are willing to pay a higher price point? Or you give an option to make a lower price point as well. I don't know. I think it's growing pains. I have no, complaints or anything against them personally because I haven't been to any, but we were even our team was at Afro Punk a couple weeks back, and my business partner hit me. He was like, it's weird. I think festivals are dying, because he was just talking about the dynamics and the people. And he was like, people weren't showing up till halfway through the day, whereas festivals, people used to break down the barriers to get in. So I think we're just in a different era. And I think COVID is part of that. I think Astro World was part of that. I think there's just a lot of things that are changing. Like insurance for festivals is sky high. That's another thing that people have not been discussing, but I had to deal with that this year. I had to pay 6 times what we paid the previous year for the same spaces, just to get insurance to make sure that we were covered. And that's a direct result of Astro World. We had to go through 6 different insurance companies, or 5 different insurance companies, to find somebody to even carry our policy. Same event, almost the same lineup. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think even things like that are changing because it's putting pressure on the festival promoters. And yeah, people aren't talking about it. I feel bad for them, but I think the festival as it's known now is dying.
The dopest, well, the most well-run festival that we were a part of was always Soundset Festival. And I don't even think they do it anymore. But the ticket prices were reasonable. Everything ran super smooth. They really had things down pat. The last thing I would say is to artists that get on these festivals, because Aaron just mentioned that a lot of people aren't showing up until late. Some of these artists are performing in front of 20, 30, 40 people when the festival is supposed to have, tens of thousands of people. Get on stage on time, still respect the promoter, still respect the event, and put on a hell of a show. I saw Key's artist, I can't remember who it was, but I saw a video of her artist just killing it, giving it his all. And there was, hardly anybody there, but he was doing his thing. I wish I could remember his name to shout him out. But it's so important to respect the festival, be professional, and just put on a hell of a show, even if it's one person. So Anyway, the topic I wanted to get into, I've been having a lot of conversations with artists for the BeatStars records, and you know, we're about to start putting out music. There was an artist that hit me who's doing pretty well. You know, I'm not going to name his name, not going to put his business out there, but he basically was like, "Damn, I want to talk to you." You know, so we had a conversation. He essentially is a solid artist, you know, puts out quality music. Said he's making about 9 or 10 grand a month. I looked on Spotify. He, you know, is doing over 400,000 monthly listeners. Has a side business, like everything's going well. And, you know, from last year, there's been tremendous growth, but he was still frustrated because he wasn't in particular pockets. He wasn't in particular circles. And I've come across this so many times with independent artists that have success, have a fan base, a growing community, but they're upset because they're not getting certain looks. They're upset because they're not standing next to a particular person. Hobson is an example of this. Like, we had created our own table. We were eating well, but he was still looking at other tables and being like, man, you know, how come the girls aren't cuter at my shows? How come, you know, we're not in this? How come we're not in that? And it's like, you know, people are not happy with the success that they've created, you know, not knowing that, or maybe knowing that a million other artists would kill to be in their shoes. You know, sometimes you can do what you want and like end up in the places that you want to be. But if that really is important to you, you have to be intentional about how you move, and you have to make the right connections to sit at the table that you want to sit. Other than that, you know, you have to be happy. You should be happy. And instead of finding something else, you should be doubling down on what grew you from last year to this year. Like, what happened? What did you like? Keep growing. Like, the artist that he was comparing himself to, I looked on Spotify, they had less monthly listeners than him. They had less of a presence than him. I was like, how could you be upset at this? Like, you're essentially doing better than them, probably financially. But have you guys seen that? I've seen it a lot. Have you guys seen it? And what, you know, maybe some examples or how you guys have given advice if an artist has said this to you?
I think my biggest advice would just be, look, sometimes your path in life, and certainly in the music business, because it's such a crazy space, will choose you, in the sense that you have to be detached. If you want to be successful in the music business, that's great. And you can find that, but you won't necessarily always find it in the way that you pictured yourself finding it. And that's totally okay. So I just say, be open to that. And that's just in general. I mean, like, you know, artists pivot all the time. And there are people that started out as producers and are now, you know, VPs and run labels, or they're successful managers, or people who started as rappers and are now making beats and they're successful as that. You know, just kind of be open to where the universe pushes you, especially in the music business, because you might end up in a space that you didn't necessarily consciously pick, but once you become detached from where you thought you were supposed to be, you can really enjoy the space that you're in. And I think that applies to, you know, an artist where it's like, man, I didn't realize you don't really get to pick your fan base. You make your music, even if you make it intentionally, I don't think you necessarily get to pick it. You can kind of imagine if you make if you make country influenced rap, you're probably going to be bigger in rural communities. That's kind of a given. But then again, Lil Nas X. So who knows, right?
You can have control over it. I mean, the conversation I used to have with Hobson, and it's like, you know, you're being who you are, so you're attracting who you naturally would attract, and that's okay. But it's not the traditional cool scene. Like, you weren't cool in high school. Like, that's not my fault. Like, I don't know what to do about that. You know, you want the women to look cuter at your shows, but in your songs, you're screaming at them and like calling them the B word and all this stuff. Like, women don't respond well to that. So there's not going to be a lot of women at your shows. So if you do want a particular crowd, you know, I think that you should just be you and make the music that you want to make. But if you do want a particular crowd and you're going to be upset if you're sitting at one table and you want to be on another table, then you have to really examine what you're doing and the messaging that you're putting out there. You can't scream it. I don't know that many artists, or any off the top right now, that can just make super aggressive music where you're like screaming and angry all the time and like have a bunch of women show up at their shows. Maybe you guys know of an artist like that. I can't think of one.
I'm thinking.
I think Insane Clown Posse, ICP, they had a bunch of women. Like there's
it's a particular crowd, right? Like it's not the Drake crowd. That's not the Drake crowd that's going to, Insane Clown Posse show, right? But again, I think you should be comfortable in your own skin and, make the music you want to make.
I would love to have the Juggalo crowd because they're loyal. They're becoming increasingly more and more diverse. I think as long as you are who you are, granted your fan base is a reflection of you, but you can make the most of that situation. I don't have that crowd, but I don't know. I personally wouldn't look at my life and be like, wow, I make music for a living and I'm a multimillionaire. But damn, man, why does my fan base why is it all like 30 plus, small town Americans with clown makeup on? It's just kind of like,
yeah. How about be happy for a crowd? Like there's not that many artists that have a crowd. Like, I had a genuine, candid conversation with the chief editor at Complex one year, and because they would post hops and stuff, but I can tell they didn't really support it. I could tell they just kind of posted it because they know it would get some traction, but they didn't really like support hop. And I was like, yo, let's have a candid conversation. Like, what's up with this? And he basically was like, look, Complex is all about culture. It's all about fashion. It's all about like cool things, right? Hopsin is counterculture. And I couldn't argue with it because that's their brand, right? Like that's not something I'd be like, well, shit, I understand. I understand why you're not covering him. And I'm not mad at that because they have a brand as well. So, and I think artists need to understand that it's not all about numbers. Artists think that, and don't get me wrong, like I'm a numbers guy. Like numbers broke down hella doors for us. Like as soon as we got to a certain point, we started having, access to people in certain conversations. But there are some doors that are going to remain closed regardless if your brands are not aligned. It doesn't matter if you got 1 billion followers. That's just the way it is. And if you want to align yourself, you have to really examine how you're presenting yourself, what your music sounds like, but I think that's stupid. I think you should be doubling down on what's working, and, serving the fans that love what you do.
Yeah, that's like Saucy Santana. Like if he was upset that he wasn't in these like hyper masculine rooms, you'd be like, why? Like you're betraying yourself, right? But Saucy Santana grew with his audience, which was predominantly women and gay men. And now everybody has to talk about him. Do you know what I'm saying? But then when you get in a room with them, you're like, he's talented. He's really easy to get along with. He talks to everyone. He knows exactly what his brand is and who he is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, even the fact that he's like, call me he. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because then people are like, he's like, no, I'm a man, I'm a gay man, and I'm making bops, right? Like, so I think Saucy Santana is a phenomenal example of that. Like, own what you have. And now Spotify, Apple Music, everybody is calling him, but he was in the undercurrents for the longest time. And so I even think about a lot of the artists that I work with or that are around this scene, because I work a lot in Christian hip hop. So many of these guys are like, man, I just want to do this, or I want to be at the BET Awards. I want to be here, whatever. But I'm like, you're nominated for 4 Stellar Awards and 2 Dove Awards, and you're getting flown out to do $100K worth of shows at private events and churches, and you're upset because you're not adjacent to, you know what I'm saying? Like, it makes no sense. And like, I work in both scenes. So I'm looking at the booking rates for my mainstream artists versus the booking rates for my Christian artists. And I'm like, you are a substantially smaller artists and we're getting substantially more money for you. Like, stop looking over there. Like, focus on where you're at, because when you're great, regardless, you're attractive. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I get a shit ton of opportunities because I'm good at what I do and I'm consistent. People don't care what side of the industry that I have. I started out in rock music and then got pulled over to hip hop music, then got pulled into Christian hip hop, and now I work in education. People ask me to come because I'm good at what I do. They don't care about all the silos that people say are boundaries. Those silos are only boundaries if you don't embrace them. When people don't want to embrace who they are or what they are, then you do get stuck, because it's obvious that you're trying to get somewhere else that you're not actually. If you're really you, and I think gratitude is a big point. You put a glass ceiling on yourself when you're ungrateful. When you feel like you're worth more than where you're at, if you were, you wouldn't be there. If you're there, you're supposed to be there and you should be learning something. And so I think there's a ton of ingratitude in scenes in general, but that's what I see. And it's this entitlement. That's what your ingratitude comes from, entitlement. You think you should be somewhere else. Again, keep working or wait. But you feeling like you got to look here, look here, look here. You're not focused on where you're at. You're never going to grow in the way that you're supposed to. So get over yourself, one.
No, and
sit down and learn something.
If you're always looking over at your neighbor's yard and neglect your own garden, you're never going to grow anything. And then at the end of the season, you're going to wonder why you don't have any food or why all your plants withered away. And you see a lot of artists doing that. And it comes with gratitude. They're not tending their own gardens. They're not looking at their own fan bases and saying, okay, I got to make sure that I give them the best experience because I can grow what I already have. It might be a slow growth, but as long as I tend to these folks that support me, they'll stick around forever and I'll have longevity. And the
ingratitude, I feel like it limits the collaboration. If you see another artist that's doing something that you want, most people immediately hate. They don't want to say, let me one, learn, and then two, collaborate. They want to hate, and it's like that. You look foolish hating, but not learning. If somebody's doing something well, even if I don't like them, the first thing I'm going to do is study. But most people won't get over themselves for that.
Yeah. Well, on the Saucy Santana thing, I have, Dame, to answer your question, I have an amazing example of that, because you said if Saucy Santana had decided that he would rather, he just, he'd rather be in a space that didn't make sense. I was talking about a rapper that, and I said her name, I'm not going to say it again, in a previous episode, where she was the one that said, I don't think you're going to make it in the music business. She was a lesbian hip hop artist, and and she wasn't a great rapper. We would play shows, and it was what she represented to the people that loved her. Because at that time, there weren't out hip hop artists. There were, but it was a smaller scene, and she was at the top of it. And she didn't appreciate it. I mean, I saw people crying at the shows, not because of how good she was, but because of what she represented to them. And that meant a lot to them. And at one point in her career, she told us all, hey, I'm trying to go mainstream. I got to tone down all the gay stuff. That was the beginning of the end.
But that was a thing at one point, right? Like that was a thing at one point. Like you
that didn't work for anybody. That never worked.
No, that it kind of, you had to navigate the industry a certain way in order to achieve some success. However, now with the internet and hopefully some shift in thinking, you can find huge pockets of people to be your fans, kind of being who you are. And at the end of the day, this is the last thing I'll say, like, what's cool is being comfortable in your own skin, no matter who you are. Right. Or what's not cool is not being comfortable in your own skin. So you're over here, Hop's over here trying, striving to be cool, doing the most uncool thing possible to do it. Like that shit was weird to me. But yeah, I think there was a certain way you had to navigate the industry at one point. And now we just have more flexibility, in order to kind of set things up our own way. So I don't know what time period this was, but
No, this
wasn't-
look, they were doing well. The group was doing well. I mean, they were living off of it, and it just when you're at the top of a community, you've created your own scene, essentially. That's not the time to abandon it. That's what I'm saying. Granted, and this was during the era where the internet was there. It wasn't what it was today, or what it is today. I think in a lot of ways was better because people were buying way more merchandise. There wasn't streaming. There were physical sales, but you still had the benefits of social media. You still had the benefits of certain internet resources to help build community. And look, I'm not in people's heads. I don't know what it's like to be a member of a marginalized community when it comes to sexual orientation. So the decision it didn't seem like it was out of fear or embarrassment or getting blackballed by big opportunities because of discrimination. It was like, there's this amazing community of people who love you. Just give them what they need from you because they really appreciate it, and scale that up. And what happened was the music just became empty because it was like, I'm going to step away from representing this community that got me to this point. And I'm just going to make mindless music. And it's like, but there's mindless music everywhere. And the communities that you built doesn't embrace them the way they embrace you. So now you're walking in the opposite direction. You turn your back on them effectively. So that's what I mean. And it just goes back to what I think what Aaron said resonated with me was the ingratitude. Because the second that happens, it's reflected in the music, it's reflected in the marketing, it's reflected in the performance, it's reflected in fan interaction, social media, all of that. And people start finding other people. Fans feel betrayed. Fans have this, if a fan has a personal connection to you and you suddenly start switching shit up, they feel betrayed. They're perceptive. They have intuition. They know. Like, these are people that love you. They might not know you personally, but they feel your energy. So any energetic shifts, they'll catch.
I just personally feel like if you're excellent, all the things that you want will come to you. If they haven't come, either you're not excellent or you need to continue to be excellent. And I'm not the biggest Russ fan, but he is a great example of that. He felt like people were not rocking with him, so he just kept doing what he was doing. He was complaining the whole time, but now he's one of the highest paid independent artists. Do you know what I'm saying? Because even though he was complaining, I can't fault him because he kept going. I think that I have always in my life wanted to be paid to speak. Like, I felt like my ideas, my thoughts, my words were of value enough for people to pay me for those. And it was a long journey, but now that's like, I get paid. That's what I get paid to do now. Like, I make way more money talking to people about my concepts and ideas than I do managing other people's concepts and ideas. So I think the thought process is put your head down, and stop looking out across. Like, sit down and be grateful again. And this is not a sit down and shut up, but I just don't believe that excellent people don't rise to the top because there's so much shit in the world. Like, there's so much trash and mediocrity. And, like, if you have a decent personality and good work ethic and you are accessible, you're gonna win. Add excellence to that. There's no way you can fail. Just chill out, embrace stasis, as my business coach would say. If it doesn't feel like it's going here, embrace it here and get really good at the things that you said you wanted to do. And then when all of those things are successful, you'll turn around and be like, damn, I'm where I thought I wanted to be. But yeah, stop looking over other people's fence. It's annoying. Payne, you want to talk about your producers?
Oh, they're not my producers. So I'm trying to, I've kind of run this into the ground on social media, but I'll give, not on the podcast yet, but I'll give you a rundown of something that happened to me, and then kind of zoom out a little bit. There was I get loops and samples sent to me all the time by people I don't know. And it's obviously a copy and paste because it's always, hey, bro, how are you feeling? It's just like, you don't know me. Like, this is the first time we've ever interacted. So you're calling a million people, bro. And already that's kind of disingenuous. And you're sending, my Gmail is full now. It's so frustrating. People just keep sending attachments because nobody reaches out and says, how can I send you samples? I mean, some people do, but at this point, I'm like, I can't respond to them because my inbox is full. I don't need any more samples. You guys are killing me. So I got 3 emails back to back with 11 attachments to each one. I think even more than 11, honestly. So because I'm like, why is my inbox suddenly full? Oh, that's why. And it was a guy, big all caps subject line, get placements with these samples, the hottest samples in the world, fire samples. I'm like, well, that's pretty presumptuous of you that you're sending me your sample saying get placements with these. It's kind of like, hey, I'm using you for a placement in plain English, which is what I'm just going to be real. This is what a lot of loop makers are doing. They're just using people for placements. Some of the loop makers are amazing, but these new guys that just been making loops for like a month or two, they're using us. They're trying to find producers who have placements already, who have a name, and they're sending us samples because that's the minimum amount of work they have to do. They don't have to go out and network. They don't have to actually complete a track. Most of the samples are pretty mediocre. There are some amazing sample composers out there. I work with a lot of them. I like to think I've composed some pretty good samples out there, and I've gotten placements with samples. But I've been doing this for decades, That's another topic entirely. What happened to me was I check these samples just to see, because the guy is obviously confident. The very first sample that I play from his batch was just a YouTube rip of a Kylie Minogue song. And I checked his terms and it says, I own all of these samples legally and I want 50% if you get a placement. Then I listened to some of the others, and then some of the other emails that he sent me. They were all just songs he ripped off of YouTube. Hits. Not like obscure soul samples from the 60s, not like French film music that's hard to find. I'm talking about Kylie Minogue, Brenda K. Starr, songs that were hits at one point, singles. So apparently this happens a lot. I know some people will say, well, he's a curator. I hate that word because that just means it's like influencer. What do you do? I'm an influencer. That doesn't mean anything. Curator doesn't mean anything. In this case, curator just means being lazy and not doing shit and wanting to get paid for it. So I heard that this was happening a lot. So I spoke on it on social media. And most people were like, yeah, that's crazy. There was a backlash though. And I'm like, how is there a backlash from other producers? The big one was some guy saying this, that's really mean of you to talk about this guy. He's a really nice guy. You should have educated him. You should have taken your time to educate him rather than, talk about this. It's like, well, here's the thing. One, it's not my responsibility to if someone walks up to me and punches me in the mouth, I'm not here to educate them on nonviolence. If someone walks into my house and steals my TV, I'm not there to educate them on, the economic impact of robbing people within your own neighborhood. Like, that's just kind of not, like, you did something wrong. The context doesn't really matter to me. I'm upset with you and I don't want to be your friend or work with you after you do that. However, I did actually reply to him and say, what you're doing is wrong. Here's why. And I explained it to him. And his response was a single line. All right, I'll take you off my list. Basically a fuck you. And he didn't take me off the list. He kept sending me more shit. So I actually got called a bully for this. Someone said, the first one of the comments I got said, surprised he was nice enough to block his name while bullying him, because I tried to block the guy's name in the first video I made. So my question to you guys is, the producer community seems to want to embrace the things that will hurt them, because if someone, like, if I rip a Bruno Mars song off of YouTube and send it to someone and say, hey, here's this new sample I made called Leave the Door Open, and that person is like, oh, did you make this? Yeah, I own it 100%. Just give me 50% when you get a placement. And they get a placement. They're stupid enough to get a placement with it. And then the label asks them, aren't there samples in this? And they say, no. The sample maker said there weren't. We're fine. Then at the last minute, because the label will find out, trust me, every time you get a placement, people don't realize it because they've never done this. They're on the outside looking in. The labels will find out if it's a sample. They have their ways. And when they find out, they're going to be livid at you. They're probably not going to, like, the record's not going to happen. And we're talking about big names, hit singles. Samples are expensive to clear, period. But a Kylie Minogue sample, come on, dude. So that's going to cause all types of problems. You, as the producer who used that sample that I sent you, you're in trouble. Your reputation has taken a hit. Whoever is A&Ring that project, they're probably not going to work with you again. Not because you used a sample, but because you lied about it. And you didn't even know you were lying, because I tricked you. And now I've just affected you in such a serious way where now you might not be able to work in the music business in the same capacity, and you're not able to support yourself anymore like you used to. And I'm just sitting back like, I'll just find another producer to send these samples to. I'm trying to make my 50%. And there are people who defend this. I'm actually at a loss of words. I just want to know your reaction to, because it seems like the producer community, there are people in the producer community that just forces of self-destruction. When someone is spitting in their face, they're like, thank you. That's real good saliva. I'm not going to criticize you for that. And we're not, I have to live and work in this space. And like, if people come over to my house and shit on the floor and don't clean it up, and then you have other people showing up and they're like, well, that's fine. Why are you mad at them for shitting? They don't know better. Eventually, I just have to close my doors entirely. So I don't know. Sorry that I'm scattered. I'm at a loss for words, just observing all the stuff that's happening in the producer world right now.
I just can't imagine that this is like a huge thing. Like, again, like, I don't want to speak to the bottom of folks that aren't going to listen to anything on this podcast. Like, if people are taking hit songs and sending them and faking, tricking people into believing that they own these loops or samples, like, I don't even have any words for that. I mean, if it's a major thing that's going on, I think that's terrible, but I don't think our crowd knows. I think our crowd knows that they shouldn't be doing that. Like, that's pretty basic, right? So I don't have that many words for it. I think
I think they know that they're not supposed to be doing it, but when it happens, what's the response? Is it, oh, well, that's cool, just let them grind? Or, well, that's not really any of my business. I'm more talking about what is the proper response? Is there a proper response? Do we ignore it?
I wouldn't have. You respond to a lot more people than I would care to. Like, I wouldn't even that. Like, I would have just deleted people that send me beats. I don't respond to them and say, hey, I'm not an artist and I'm not looking for beats. I just send them to spam. I just wouldn't engage with those people. It's too much time.
And I think the people that you're noting that you're like, they're embracing it. I don't want to say this in a mean way, because immediately I was like, they're not part of the producer community. I guess they are, but they're not making money. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, they may make beats and they may have a BeatStars account, but this is foolishness. Anybody who has time to defend it is not making a living or even attempting to make a living in the music industry. And if they're saying you should be educated, they're also not listening to this podcast. So I don't know.
I just look at it like they are part of the producer community, whether we like it or not. And it's like there might be some kids in the neighborhood that throw trash on everyone's yard. They're not homeowners, they're kids. But it's still a problem. They don't affect our homes in any real substantial way. They're not breaking windows, but they're throwing trash. We got to deal with the trash every single day. So at some point, yeah, we can afford to ignore it and just clean up the trash ourselves and go along with our day. But what happens when more people see that, they're like, oh, well, this is just a trashy neighborhood. Let's just keep throwing trash everywhere. And like, you know what I mean? At some point, you got to deal with more trash than you want. So
I don't think that that's a problem reserved, though, then for like the smaller people, because I was at Revolt last year and this guy asked Chance the Rapper, I have a bunch of songs with samples, but I feel like people pay attention to me more when I'm rapping over well-known beats. What should I do? And Chance was like, keep releasing them on the internet until Spotify flags you, and then tell everybody that Spotify flagged you, and then turn that into a whole thing. And I was floored at first. I'm like, there are 2,000 people in this room, and you just told this man to rip famous beats and rap over them and put it on Spotify. But then I thought about it, and he's like talking to a guy who's obviously not making a living off of it. I would never give that advice, but I get it from his perspective. So I'm saying, like, by the same token with this dude, kind of like what Dame is saying, I'm not about to go on a rampage and be like, Chance the Rapper is telling people to sample songs and put it. It's just like, there's so much trash out there. I just want to hover above. I live in a gated community now. Like, they can't even throw trash on my porch. Like, I see, you know what I'm saying?
Excellence Academy manor.
Yeah, exactly. The Excellence Academy, we have an estate, so there's no trash. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I got security guards, whatever. I get it, but I think that if you continue to pay attention to the people throwing the trash, they're going to keep throwing the trash because at least they're getting attention for it.
Well, it's kind of my job to pay attention given what I do. So, like, unfortunately, I'm a commentator. I think if I didn't have a platform, I wouldn't be speaking on this stuff.
To a certain extent, though, like you know, I think there are definitely topics that we should address that are very confusing, whether it's in the Web3 space or, you know, things that are like genuinely confusing and people are taking different approaches. Like the bottom of the barrel, like sending out, you know, loops from hits. Like, I mean, I think we can all agree that that's ridiculous. And I would hope anybody listening to this would know that already, that you can't just like take Thriller and, you know, put it in your song and, you know, so yeah. But anyway. Well,
no, people don't know that. It really, I would imagine that the bottom is much larger than the top if we're using that metaphor. In addition to that, there's confusion about what fair use is. There are all the copyright myths, for example. There's still a myth that's widely accepted that you can legally sample a certain amount of time, and the time always varies. It's completely wrong. You can't sample anything legally, you know, without clearing it. But that's a myth that's out there. Number two, we start getting into gray area. So, all right, maybe a guy's not, you know, people were sharing stories with me. This wasn't just me having a conversation ranting in my room. That my video got over 50,000 views. So it was very engaging and a lot of people engaged with it. And there's this gray area where there are royalty-free samples. We talk about that a lot. There's a lot of ambiguity there, a lot of confusion there that you know, we often will clear up on these episodes. Well, what about the people who repurpose royalty-free samples, claim them as their own, or just blatantly send those out? Well, that's still a copyright infringement, but people don't understand that because of this conflation of royalty-free and totally free to exploit any way you want. What about the people that incorporate royalty-free elements into samples that they create? There's a lot to be spoken about, and this is happening at all levels of the industry. Years ago,
I think some of those conversations are fair, right? But that still is a little bit more elevated than some rando sending you a piece of a Kylie Minogue song, telling you that, you know, they own it, and to holla at me when you get a placement. Like, you know, I just think that there's levels to it, and I don't think we should be focusing our time, you know, talking to the bottom level, right? Like,
oh, okay,
that's just my opinion. Like, you know, I'm not like some rando that sends you an email. Like, you know, I mean, if your video is getting hella views, and maybe the people that don't understand that, then I'm at a loss for words. I don't know what to tell them, but that's just me.
Yeah, so, I don't either. I said what I needed to say.
For sure. I know we only got a few more minutes, and we didn't even get to Aaron's topic yet. But Aaron, you want to just take the floor and bring us home?
Rihanna is playing the Super Bowl, and I'm super stoked about that. That's really what I wanted to talk about, but I recognize it has to be a lesson. So I want to talk about self-sufficiency just really quickly, which is essentially what we were all discussing when it's like, stop looking at everybody else's yard. You know, if you are truly self-sufficient, you don't have to play by other people's rules, right? And a major label star typically doesn't walk away, especially not a Black woman, from a successful career in music and quadruple her income, right? You know, like she's doing $1 billion in revenue now, and it's still now getting in. You know, they say the Super Bowl is like the biggest stage in music because you're getting to everybody, you know, or the biggest stage in American music. But for her to now be brought back to do a song, I think it's just a lesson in self-sufficiency, and not self-sufficiency in a way that she's doing everything. Clearly, she's not doing everything. You don't have $1 billion company if you're doing everything. But the fact that she believed in herself and she bet on herself, you don't accidentally become a billionaire, right? Like people will say, well, this and this and this, but it's not by accident, right? If we're scaling it, because some people will be like, well, she was signed to Roc Nation. I could respectfully, Rhapsody is also signed to Roc Nation. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, exceptionally skilled, incredible woman. I love Rhapsody. Just saw her at Dreamland Fest in Tulsa. But if we're looking, so when people try to throw that out, well, she was signed to Roc Nation, sure, but now as a billionaire, she's a self-sufficient person, meaning that she's creating her own rules. I think that more artists should be looking to create their own playing field, like learn the game and then create your own. My business partner and I often say we're not competing with anybody because we're playing completely different games. But we had to get into the music industry. We had to learn the game. We had to figure it out and then realize that's not what we want to play. We're going to come out and do it this way, right? So I think artists should be really intentional about studying people who have not had to play by the rules. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think Rihanna is a great example of that. I think even Funk Volume, like that phenomenal example of not having to play by the rules. But if we're looking at modern examples, I think somebody like Russ, definitely La Russell, outside of hip hop, I'm trying to think. I think even like Elon Musk, granted, he's a billionaire white man, so it's a little bit of a different scale. But I think artists should be, especially independent artists, should be more intentional about studying people who have come out or have come into the game, done what they needed to do, and then exploited it to the nth degree. If you're always trying to play by other people's rules, you'll always have to rely on other people. But you can become self-sufficient when you learn the game and play by your own rules.
The only thing I'll say about Rihanna, and I'm about to sound like a hater, is I'm super surprised that she ended up with A$AP Rocky. Like, for how A$AP Rocky came out, and like I would have never seen like that pairing in the trajectory when A$AP Rocky came out. Not that A$AP Rocky's a bad dude. I think he's dope. I think he's a cool cat. And there's a lot of stuff I don't even understand, like how he got so big. To be honest, like that'd be a great case study because I don't.
He's a fashion guy. It's
Right.
more on like he knows a lot of people. He's very inundated in the fashion scene. He does like he's a social influencer who also raps. His social influence is way bigger than his rap career. So it makes sense to me, but ASAP Rocky is like more of an iconic figure than he is a rapper in my book.
And I didn't see that coming out. Like, you know, I thought he was just going to have kind of a normal trajectory as a, you know, New York artist, successful for sure. But I didn't see that. And I definitely didn't see that pairing. So,
You know, that's how he became like successful as a rapper. Because in the New York streets, he was like the coolest person out there. That's the same with like Guap Dad. Guap Dad started rapping because he was the biggest party promoter in the Bay, and he was like the cool kid, and he was scamming people. So he was like, "Let me make everything go legit. I'm gonna start rapping." So like same with ASAP. Not that there's stories that he was a scammer, but ASAP was just the cool kid, and he was like, "Well, let me turn this into something else."
Stories that ASAP was a scammer? Well, I mean, it's New York.
I guess times are different. I never really equated like scamming with cool. Like, how can the scammer also be like the cool guy?
That's a major cultural shift. Yeah.
You have to be cool to scam. You can scam people if you're believable. So if everybody loves you, they're not questioning what you're doing on the back end, but now you're in every room, every party. Like scam culture is massive in Atlanta, but it's like, especially for women. But if everybody likes you, it's way easier to be a scammer. If I didn't have certain morals, I would definitely be a scammer because it's easy money. Like what?
I think all three of us could make a killing off of scams.
What are they scamming?
Not like the credit card swipers and stuff, but you know.
I mean, Guap Dad started out like swiping credit cards, or like you steal a car and then you rent it for a week, or you like there's a lot you can do like online, like a lot of online scams too, but it's scamming money. A lot of people used to hack into Uber accounts and stuff like that and run it, but there's a million ways to scam, like literally.
That stupid ass iPhone scam. I hate that one, but people love it. People do it all the time, and especially young people who don't care about their credit scores because it doesn't affect them at that point.
No. I got.
I don't want to get too far into it, but like, yeah, I don't know. I don't. We're in gray area. Yeah, let's close out. I don't want to be the instruction manual for scammers.
Facts. That's why I didn't. There's some simple scams that I could have just told right then. I was like, I'm not even gonna say, because then I don't want people. Yeah.
Just just send funk volume samples to producers. Scam them that way. Cool. So we'll be back same time. Won't be talking about sample scams again. Same time, same place. On the MEC podcast. Join the Excellence Academy. It's the excellenceacademy.com, right?
.biz.
.biz, my bad. I knew I was going to get it wrong. And here's something else I always get wrong. I'm on Looped In every single Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I will personally text you every time I go live. And I always forget the number. So
all you need to do is text MEC to 844-206-7800. You'll get a text right before he goes live. Yeah, we'll see y'all next week.
All right, everyone. Peace.
Peace.